Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into the fascinating historical context and the absolute striking metaphors found in the biblical account of the triumphal entry. Whether you know the Palm Sunday story like the back of your hand, or you're literally looking at it for the very first time, the source material we're exploring today paints an incredibly vivid picture of creation, praise, and human purpose. It's an amazing scene, and it all builds up to one of the most famous and, let's be honest, visually mind-bending statements Jesus ever made.
So, to kick things off, let's start with a rather absurd visual. I want you to imagine inanimate stones just spontaneously shouting out loud. Seriously, take a second and picture this. You're walking down a dusty dirt road, and suddenly the gravel crunching under your feet and the giant boulders up on the hillside just start cheering, singing, and shouting praises. I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a fantasy movie, right? But believe it or not, this wild imagery is actually the focal point of a very real, very tense historical moment recorded in the Gospel of Luke.
To really grasp what's going on with this wild imagery, we need to trace the sequence of events in Luke chapter 19 as Jesus makes his way down the Mount of Olives toward Jerusalem. The day kicks off with Jesus leaving a dinner at Zacchaeus' house. He's just wrapped up teaching a parable to clarify that, no, the kingdom of God wasn't going to just instantly appear that afternoon. Fast forward to midday, and he sends two of his disciples ahead to a nearby village to grab a young donkey, specifically a colt that literally no one has ever ridden. He tells them, hey, if the owners ask what you're doing, just say, the Lord needs it. And sure enough, later that afternoon, that is exactly how it plays out. They bring the colt back, they throw their coats over it, and Jesus rides along. By the late afternoon, as he hits the road heading down the Mount of Olives, the crowd just absolutely erupts. They're throwing their garments on the road, they're shouting, they're singing praises to God for all these incredible miracles they've witnessed, shouting things like, blessings on the King who comes in the name of the Lord.
Now, as you might guess, not everybody was thrilled with this massive, noisy parade. While the crowds are joyfully celebrating their coming king, the religious leaders are furious. The Pharisees in the crowd demand that Jesus shut this down immediately. They yell out, "Teacher, rebuke your followers for saying things like that." They wanted the singing stopped, the praising shut down, and the entire crowd silenced right then and there.
Well, Jesus' response to those complaining Pharisees is famous for a reason, and it's super interesting to see how different translations capture it. Just look at the phrasing. In the King James Version, Jesus says that if the people held their peace, the stones would immediately cry out. The English Standard Version phrases it, the very stones would cry out. And the Voice translation gives it this incredibly active, urgent feel, saying, listen, if they were silent, the very rocks would start to shout. Basically, Jesus is telling them this praise is completely inevitable. It is going to happen. If you try to silence the humans, well, creation itself is going to step in and fill the void.
And that brings us to a deeply personal reflection for anyone reading this text. It introduces this really sobering thought. Inanimate objects, literal gravel and stones, stepping up to fulfill a purpose, just because humanity chose to stay silent. It's a striking concept, right? The idea that a pile of rocks would end up doing the worshiping that humanity was uniquely created to do.
This actually perfectly illustrates a recurring theme throughout the Bible. All of nature, from the expansive skies to the flowing rivers, is already actively praising and worshiping God. Jesus didn't just pull this metaphor out of thin air on Palm Sunday. Look at these incredibly vibrant descriptions from the Old Testament. Psalm 19 says the heavens proclaim the glory of God. Isaiah 55 describes mountains and hills literally bursting into song and the trees of the field clapping their hands. The Psalms even go on to say that the fields and crops burst with joy and the rivers clap their hands in glee. Creation's chorus is loud, it's active, and it is entirely devoted to praising its maker.
But here is the massive irony that the source text points out. God created the breathtaking stars, the roaring seas, the majestic mountains, the towering forests, yet Ephesians 2:10 says that humans are God's masterpiece. According to the text, humanity is beautifully crafted anew with a specific purpose to do good things that were planned out long ago. Out of all the magnificent, jaw-dropping things in the entire universe, it's humanity that gets this specific, highly exalted title.
Building on that exact thought, James 1:18 adds another layer, calling humanity the Creator's prized possession. Within this biblical framework, humanity is basically viewed as the absolute top tier of creation, carefully chosen and deeply valued by the Creator. The text makes it clear, humanity isn't some afterthought. They are precious, born of true word, and held up as the most treasured creation of all.
So, the crucial point the text lands on is this really vivid contrast. If rivers and mountains naturally praise without a second thought, if the rocks are ready to shout and the trees are out there clapping their hands, why does the text suggest that humanity, the supposed masterpiece and prized possession, is so often the one holding back?
Okay, let's pivot and really break down what biblical worship actually looks like in everyday practice, because the text moves us far beyond just singing songs or showing up to a service. The source material explains that worship is this complete, all-encompassing response of the heart, mind, body, and spirit. It's a whole anatomy, and we're going to look at it through 4 distinct steps: the heart, the lifestyle, the spirit, and the community.
Let's start right at step 1, the heart. The source notes that while the ancient Hebrew and Greek words for worship are, let's be honest, incredibly tough to pronounce, their literal meanings are just beautiful. This core concept literally means to bow down or to kiss toward. It is entirely about submission and humility. It asks the reader a direct question: are you willing to love and worship your Creator with absolutely everything you are? It starts right there, deep at the center of who a person is.
Now that internal submission, it naturally builds into step 2, a lifestyle. This proves that true worship is presented as an active, everyday service to the kingdom, definitely not just some fleeting emotional feeling. It's all about labor and obedience. It's how someone lives on a random Tuesday afternoon at the office, just as much as what they do in a gathering on Sunday morning. Devotion has to materialize into active service and real-world obedience to God's commands.
Furthermore, Jesus emphasizes that all those external rituals take a back seat to what's going on inside, which brings us to step 3, the Spirit. Referencing John 4:24, the text points out that God is Spirit, and those who worship Him must worship in spirit and truth. So all the external stuff, the singing, the lifting hands, even the serving, takes second place if that sincere internal connection just isn't there. It's all about a truthful, authentic connection based on who God actually is.
Finally, we absolutely cannot neglect step 4, the community. Our source draws on Hebrews 10:24-25 to remind us that gathering together to encourage each other is a vital, totally irreplaceable piece of the worship puzzle. The text urges believers to actively think of ways to motivate one another to acts of love and good works, and to not neglect meeting together. Doing this together as a collective body is a fundamental part of how humans are designed to praise within this entire framework.
When we combine these 4 elements, heart, lifestyle, spirit, and community, it essentially reflects the cosmic chorus outlined in Psalm 148. And I mean cosmic. Absolutely every created thing is commanded to praise. Angels, the armies of heaven, the sun, the moon, the twinkling stars. It goes on to list creatures of the ocean depths, fire, hail, snow, wind, mountains, fruit trees, wild animals, and yes, kings, rulers, and all people. Everyone and everything called to unite in one massive, universe-wide chorus.
And this all points toward a breathtaking future reality captured in Revelation 5:13. The text describes this grand vision where every single creature across the entire universe joins together. It says, "Every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea sang." They all join together to sing blessing, honor, glory, and power to God forever and ever. It's portrayed as the ultimate culmination of creation fulfilling its truest, most ultimate purpose. So as we wrap up today's explainer, I'll leave you with this provocative final thought that this ancient text poses to its readers. Considering that the rocks, the rivers, the mountains, and the stars are continually crying out and doing exactly what they were made to do, what holds humanity back from doing the same? Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this fascinating source material. Stay curious, keep learning, and I'll see you in our next explainer.